Well, we are at time, and I would love to give the majority of our time to our guests. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started, and people can jump in as they enter. So Amanda, will you advance the slides for us? So thank you for joining the GRAD Partnership Community Practice session today. The GRAD Partnership, this is the set of the organizing members who have come together to work on this. And includes AIR, the Bar Center, Carnegie Foundation, Everyone Graduates, National Center for Learning Disabilities, Network for College Success, Rural Schools Collaborative, Shop Foundation, Talent Development Secretary, and we have a lot of others who are part of it. I am Kelly McMahon from the Carnegie Foundation, and I am really honored to be here representing this group and excited to invite you in. Amanda, if you could advance for us, it would be great for you to welcome each other. So part of our community is also saying hi to one another. This prompt is really inspired by, for those who have done Peloton, so ridden on the bike, Peloton has this really lovely feature that it just pops up and invites you to high five a stranger who's taking the class with you, which is really such a lovely thing. And I, at first, was sort of bothered because, you know, as you're struggling on the bike, all kinds of things go through your mind. But I really found the high five to be energizing. And so I welcome you, if you can, throughout the time in our community, you can use the chat and invite you now. If you want, say hello to a friend in the chat or high five someone at any point that you want. So it's part of the fun of being in this community, and also just help you find the chat. So that's a place where you can ask questions. You can share resources as they come up, but feel free to use the chat and say hello, high five people as you can, and hopefully we can make some new friends too. Amanda, if you could advance for us. So the mission of the GRAD Partnership is that we're partnering with communities to use high quality student success systems so that schools are empowered to graduate all students ready for the future. Hello, Val Brown, it's nice to see you. And hello, Kathy, we're glad you're here. This work is really predicated on the fact that we have really strong evidence about the power of predictive indicators. And we know that 9th grade on track student achievement, which includes earning enough credits to be promoted to sophomore year, is the single best predictor of whether a student will graduate from high school within 4 years. It is more so than their prior test scores, family income, race, or ethnicity. It's really power of this predictive indicators. So how do we use this? How do we create the conditions in our schools to be more responsive to this? And how do we organize ourselves to get better at making sure our students are on track, particularly when we know how much and how important the conditions are that we create in our schools? Amanda, if you could advance. Welcome, friends, as you're joining. We're glad you're here. So just to remind folks, student success systems are ways of organizing a school community to better support the academic progress, high school graduation, post-secondary success rates, and the well-being of all students. They really focus on bringing together these 4 elements, including combining a focus on building strong relationships. We know it really matters when students have relationships with peers in a school. And we also know the extent to which the power of having a relationship, even with just one adult, can really matter for students. And that increases their connectedness to school, which then in turn has influence on attendance and also academics. There's all kinds of positive things that come from having these strong relationships within our schools. Having real-time, actionable, holistic data. So making sure you have the right data in the right hands at the right time. And that's a sort of broad definition of data, but going back to the power of those predictive indicators, we know attendance, behavior, and course grades really matter, but we have a growing sense about the importance of having student data and understanding from our students levels of agency, belonging, and connectedness. And then also getting a chance to learn both quantitatively and qualitative from people. And so making sure we're broadening our ideas about having a holistic sense of what we're learning about students, their experiences, and how we're doing. And that leads us to having strategic improvement actions. So really putting people in interaction with this data so that they can be responsive and understanding when we're making changes or we're intervening because we see that our students are not on track. How do we know that those changes are improvements? We're going to be really attentive to that. So having systems and routines and processes by which we respond to this data and continue to learn from it. And then lastly, all of this is really shaped by the mindsets and the ways in which we show up and interact with that. We know that data don't drive, it's people that do. And so how do we show up and respond to the data that we're seeing? How we're responding to when we see a problem, how we're acting? Are we being proactive or reactive? And then how are we being asset minded? So I'll say a little bit more about that. Amanda, if you'll advance the slides. So a shared set of mindsets. And I bring this up because this is really about thinking about attending to the students in the building, but there's a lot of parts of this that really matter. So when the adults are implementing student success systems, it's really important that they have a shared understanding of their purpose. And that includes all of these things being equity rather than injustice, focusing on equity rather than injustice and unfairness, that we're inclusive, that we really are paying attention and being empathetic with what we're doing rather than judging and blaming. A lot of this has to do with thinking about, and this is why we've changed the language from on track or early warning systems to really being focused on student success system, is because that early warning sort of sense really focus on the problems of things. And instead we want to be thinking about how we're setting people up for success. And this is a lot of our mindsets around that. So we're strengths and asset-based framing rather than deficit framing, that we are proactive, paying attention to proaction rather than remediation. And then thinking about belief in educator and student agency rather than thinking that nothing can be done. And I think our guests today are going to really help us with that. Amanda, if you could advance. So student success systems, all of these parts, paying attention to the supportive relationships, actionable data, student-centered mindsets, and how we all bring those together in our improvement actions. All of these pieces working in interaction are what create a student success system. Amanda, if you could advance for us. So why, and that's the what of our work. And so then bringing it together in this community of practice, what we're hoping to do here in this space is to connect people who want to implement, improve, and innovate on these student success systems. We want to enable shared learning. So that's what this space is for, generating motivation and inspiration. And we are defined by our mutual engagement and hopefully getting better at serving our students and creating student success systems that really make for meaningful experiences for students. Amanda, if you could advance. What it means to be in our community. These are some agreements that we hold. This is a we, not me space. So we want to share our stories and our airtime. Again, the purpose is to learn from each other. We want to accept non-closure. So a lot of the things that get introduced in this space, it might be sort of the beginnings of things, of new ideas or continuations of work. And we may not solve everything here. We want to use the ideas, but we want to keep the details in the community. So what that means is sometimes some of the best learning is from our failures or the things that we're trying that we're really struggling with. And it's important that we have a space that we can share those pieces. But we don't necessarily take that from there. So for example, one thing you might learn is like, ooh, Carnegie has a really hard time internally of working on PDSAs. The idea that you might take from that is like, it's really hard to work on PDSAs, not that Carnegie is really terrible at working on PDSAs. So it's the ideas, not necessarily the details. We want to share to learn. And sometimes our sharing can be, we want to give ourselves permission that it might be sort of, back of the napkin draft thinking. It might not be our polished best ideas, but we learn something in sharing that. We learn in trying to share it with others, but also others get ideas from our learning. So there's an invitation there to share to learn in this space. And then lastly, make room for joy. It's so much more fun when we learn together and we keep coming back when we make room for joy. So those are some of our community agreements. And with no further ado, I'm really excited to turn it over to our guest speakers today. So we have Kari and Daniel from Community Design Partners who are going to tell us more about their work that they've been working on around student-powered improvement. And so I will turn it over to them. We can stop sharing.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Kari. Daniel is, well, I don't know where he is on your screen. Give a wave, Daniel. It's so lovely to be here. And as a parent of a freshly graduated senior, this group, I extend my sincere gratitude for all the work you do in your systems to support people like her and all of her peers. So let's start with a moment of joy. It is the summer solstice. So wherever you are, let's just take a second and look if you have a window. If you don't have a window, imagine or look at a picture. Just take a second and look out your window and breathe in appreciation for the world outside of us. And for a silly moment of joy, quick, if you have the weather app, check what time sunset is wherever you live and drop it in chat. That is the longest day of the year. So here in Portland, the sun is going to set at 9:03. I'm kind of a weather person, so this is a perfect day to host a webinar. Weather and light. All right. Oh, interesting. Then we get to see where people are from too. Interesting. Next year, you should all come to Portland. It looks like we get some extra minutes in Washington. Okay. Who are we? What are we doing here? It's good to see a few familiar faces and many new ones. Quite a few years ago, our team was working deeply with continuous improvement in all kinds of education settings. And we started to notice that it was all adults, right? It was all the adults doing the continuous improvement to the students or for the students or for the school or to the school. And but we also started to notice these places where students were part of the change. And so we ourselves started to work in some sites, partnering with students for change in the continuous improvement process. And we were fortunate enough to get some grant money to explore those other bright spots, right? To explore the places where students were part of continuous improvement. So working with, not for. And the result was a resource that we're here to talk and share with you and dive in today. It'll just be the tip of the iceberg. It's called Student Powered Improvement. And it's gone through several iterations. It is the product of many people across the country, not just our team, right? It includes many case studies, stories, and resources from many different places. And Daniel later will walk us through kind of a show and tell of the different pieces after we've experienced a few. So today our team doesn't have any slides. We're going to use the resource itself and walk you through some pieces, do some activities, have a conversation about some things, and discuss and explore those together. And I really want to say before we do the first of those things that we consider ourselves not the experts, right? We are in this space representing the work we do and the work we've learned from other places, but we know all of you, each of you have stories or have stories you want to create. I see Aurora in the room, for example. They've just put out, maybe you can drop your resource in chat. They just put out a great resource of telling some of their stories about partnering with students. And I invite any of the rest of you today to tell your stories or drop in resources because there can never be enough. So with that, we're going to dive right in. And Daniel, you can share your screen to move them towards the assessment.
Yes, excited to be here. Thank you, everybody. So before we get started, I just want to, I'll show you where we're going to go, and we're going to jump right in and start to kind of get into this work. That's how we do it at Community Design Partners. And I just want to talk about really quick before I share my screen. We're going to go into an assessment, which we created together to kind of think about and orient people in terms of where they might be in relation to kind of student-powered improvement. And so it's really designed for schools, districts, organizations to take as like a starting point, a kind of a spark to provide a snapshot of where you are, as well as the potential with some supportive resources of where you could go, right? So we try to always think about how could we reimagine this work by kind of centering students as part of that process. So I am going to share my screen, and then we're going to ask you to jump in and do it. All right, so you might see this if it's not expanded. If it is expanded, it kind of looks like this. And so this is the front of our website. We have multiple places that you can jump in to take the assessment. When you just click on the Get Started, it will take you there. If you go up here in the corner, there's the assessment button. It will take you there. Basically, we wanted folks to kind of jump right into this as their starting point. And so we're going to ask you all to take this assessment. So we'll give you about 4 minutes. And then we're going to jump into a poll and kind of share where we are based on that assessment. And so if you wouldn't mind going to the website and then clicking Get Started or the assessment in the corner, and we'll give you some time to take that, and then we'll come back together. So we'll put 4 minutes. Anything I missed, Kari?
Yeah, just one thing, the prompts, if you can you go to the first question, Daniel? The
Yes.
prompts all ask, and then go to an individual is taking it. The prompts, and then begin now. The prompts all asked about your school. I know a lot of people here aren't in a school. So please either think about a school that you're in, or if you'd like to replace that word with our organization. Either way will work. This again is just to get a taste of the tool. So if you're school-based, think about your school. If you're not school-based, replace that with either a school you know well or your organization. Great. And it's only 10 questions, so we'll see you in just a few minutes.
All right. Hopefully we were able to get through that. I love that piano music. I could maybe take a nap right now. So thanks everybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up a poll just to kind of see where folks landed on that assessment. And again, just to reiterate that this is all an opportunity for growth. And so we just wanted to see where folks are at. All right, folks see that? I think it's really great to see this distribution, and folks are at the start early on, kind of in that middle spot, right? And then a few that are well along, so appreciate that. Any noticings, wonderings, or things that popped up as people were taking the assessment or thinking about kind of reflecting on students in their particular context? All right, well, so just kind of thinking back to the assessment itself, is anything that as you were thinking about those questions, and anything kind of bubble up for you all in relation to kind of centering students in this work? Any bright spots that you wanted to kind of share with everybody, or anything that you think as you were thinking about like early on or moving along that you noticed maybe you could grow in, that you wanted to share with everybody before we move into the meat of the website?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that one of our counties is Shasta County Office of Education's school board, the Board of Education. They actually had a student representative for the first time ever sit on their board. It was a senior from one of the local high schools. And they're continuing that practice as a result of implementing it for the first year. And it just really not only elevated the student voice and that they were listening and it was participatory, but it paved the pathway for future students to have that same voice on that county school board. So pretty proud of them for doing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Susan. That's great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just share that I was thinking about a particular school that I used to be involved with, and it made me think as I was answering the questions, I thought heavily about, so this was a school that had a student board that was a sort of diverse student board that was part of the school leadership team. But I realized that I was answering most of the questions relying on that, that one mechanism for student powered improvement. So I sort of was like, well, that's kind of a little bit like, and there was power, but I realized I was like, that's a really powerful, it's one mechanism. And I had this thought of like, oh, I wonder how others would interpret it. Would they think we're doing really well because we have this one mechanism? Because it was policy was sort of made by the leadership team, and there were some suggestions, and that small council had it. But it's a school of 3,000 students, and so I was like, "Ooh, is there more?" So I found myself answering a lot of the questions through the lens of that one mechanism, and wondered if there were other ways to interpret it.
Yeah, thank you for Kelly for sharing that. And in our next section, we're going to explore kind of like a framework of how we can think about students' involvement authentically and meaningfully in different ways, right? Open it up for Precious, and then we'll move into that next section.
Yeah, hi everyone. Precious Lopez, she, her, Executive Director, Providence Student Union. So I'm just going to go on the assumption that many of you are teachers and or administrators within your state and or district. And so I'm coming from a place where Providence Student Union, it's a youth-led nonprofit. And so a lot of the work that we do is fighting against the district and our Department of Education in our state. There are times where we are able to collectively work together. But I think in terms of these student success systems and some of these questions, great questions, by the way, I may steal a couple of them, but I think that while we're in a position as a nonprofit to do a lot of disruption with our district and our like education commissioner and like school policy and things of that nature, student success systems is something that we're heavily trying to put forth and make sure that our students are getting the best that they need. So when those questions come up of, do you have adults or students in your school that feel supportive or feel as though that their voices are heard within their schools? It's a hit or miss, because they come to organizations like us to say, hey, what can we do to organize to make sure that the things that we're demanding are being heard by our teachers and administrators? We have like a small group of teacher allies who support the work that we do and support our students, but I think it's just more so getting the collective of teachers within the PTU to say, yes, our students deserve better and we need to do better by them. But I totally appreciate this webinar and those questions that are a part of this website. And I think that, again, because I'm coming from nonprofit and not being directly in a school, we're kind of like the outsiders looking in, but seeing a lot of what's happening on the inside, and it's not great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that, I think we in our experience, a lot of the coaching and support and training, and we talk about this within kind of the resources around adultism and how do we disrupt kind of the conventional perspective of adults not trusting or honoring students in that kind of authentic way, right? And so Kari is going to go through some like different stages or different ways we can look at that through a framework. And then later, some of the kind of guiding principles or the conditions we need to think about as we center students. So I'm going to turn it over to Kari.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. And thanks, everyone. I do want to point out a few things that happened at the end of your assessment. The first thing is you should have gotten to this page, and anyone who takes the assessment can then have their results emailed to you. So you click on that, you put your email, and then it will always send you back to what your specific results were. And then for every different result, there are some suggested activities. You've probably already scrolled through those, right? But the very first one is to process those results. If you've taken this as an individual, there's a lot of checking you need to do versus if you've taken this as a team. So there's some protocols for checking your results, having conversations. This website was really, almost to Precious's point, created primarily for adults in systems, because we know that adults have to do so much work themselves in order to partner with students, right? We have to learn about our own adultism. We have to check on our understanding of these guiding principles. We have a lot of work to do in order to even be there. So while there are many things on here that are for students as well, the primary audience is for the adults in our system to be thinking about these things. Depending on your results, then you can explore different possibilities. This person who is moving along will go straight to some guiding principles and check out a few case studies. And then there's some suggestions for taking action. So even as I hear stories, like even as I hear the great story that finally there's a student on the school board and the county, my first thing is, what work are they doing to really make sure that that is a place of care, truth, and hope for everyone, but also for that new student, right? Or that they're considering the possibility of more than one, like what are the advanced, how can we move and advance that way along? So taking action and then thinking about expanding. Okay, Kelly said this, right? I was thinking about this one thing that's happening in my school. What are the other possibilities? So for this team, they're going to get some case studies to think about, oh, it's happening there, but could we also do this? Could we also do that? Let's explore these possibilities together and see what lights our fire in terms of what might be next. So there's a lot just after taking the assessment, besides seeing where you are on that continuum. The other resource that Precious really made me think about, and Daniel will be going through this more at the end of the webinar, but I think it's really important to state it right now, are these guiding principles, 6 guiding principles. It's up there on the top if you're navigating along with us. 6 guiding principles that really anchor in not just doing this, but doing this well, not causing harm, like doing the work of that we need to do to set the tone and think about changing at the personal, the organizational, and the system level. So later, and of course on your own, there's so much here to explore, but these are really the anchor for anything you're thinking about doing, and you saw some of those in the questions. So all of the results and all of the case studies that you see in on the resource. So there's a link to case studies, and there's almost 20 case studies now of different places, those bright spots around the country that are using continuous improvement with students, not just for students. And you can scroll through and explore those all on your own. But really what we did first before creating these case studies was to think about what is our framework, right? Which is a word that gets thrown around so much, but really what is it that's unique and that's creating a collection that shares something in common. And so the framework of student-powered improvement is where we're going to spend some time doing a quick reading and then getting in some small groups to really learn the foundations of how this model was built. So where you can find that is to go to the scrolling bar, what do you call it? Toolbar at the top. I should know now that I've actually helped create some websites. And you go to this tab called Learn. And in Learn, there are several different courses, and courses is an intimidating word. They're for shared learning, they're short, they're free, all of these things. I know when Precious said, I'm going to borrow a few questions, please do. This is all open source. This was all foundation funded. Everything is for you to take, adapt, use, make better, send us an email about how to make it better, etc. So the Student-Powered Improvement Framework is the course we're going to do some reading on right now. So it's this one at the top with the kaleidoscope. If you click on Learn More, it's going to tell you a little bit about the framework. There is an image of the framework. The great thing about this site is you're not going to have to hear me talk. You can read about it in a minute. But I just want to show you what you're going to do. You're going to look at this visual and then scroll through this short series of reading, which we're going to give you about 5 minutes. So that might be a little short. Once we have 1 minute left, you can just scan and you don't have to get it all in. We're going to give you 5 minutes to read, and then we're going to have some discussion questions when we're done. So please feel free to turn off your camera. And Kelly's going to play that great music. And when we're done, we're going to discuss this question. Where would you place existing examples of student-powered improvement that you might be a part of? And or what inspired you? Where would you like to expand? Where would you like to be on this framework? So we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody. We are going to do a speedy. Kari started to show us a little bit. Hopefully you had some good discussions about the framework, thinking about your own context and how you might think about expanding that or supporting more kind of efforts in that similar vein. So I'm going to give a quick tour overview of some other pieces of the content within the website, and then where kind of we're thinking to develop more stuff. So Kari showed us a little bit. So I'm going to start with, share that screen. As Kari mentioned, there's and you all kind of mentioned in some of the it's in the chat a little bit. I do want to orient you to the case studies that we have featured and highlighted at least 20 different kind of organizations, schools, networks that have in some capacity highlighted or centered students in their work. And so that could be empathy interviews, which is the featured one on this, which is just, kind of opening space to hear student stories, and that guides some of this work, all the way to there is like student-led networks of improvement, right? So students actually are in a group and are coming up with change ideas and actually engaging in some of that improvement process. And so each one of these case studies, we have the organization on there that that was part of that case study, the grade level, some of the focus and the context, and then we give basically a brief introduction to see if there's any connections that you might want to think about. Some quotes that are actually from that experience or that organization, so often highlighting student and adult voice within those. Where it sits on the framework so that you can get an idea and orientation, and if you want to like see more examples for a particular space on that framework. So we're always trying to kind of connect it to different parts of this content. And then we give, of course, the story of as much as we can of what they did. And so you can see that example. And then lastly, I just want to point out that we worked really hard to think about which guiding principles. And you can think of guiding principles as like the conditions that are set for students and adults to engage in this work and create that partnership. So we connected the guiding principles to each one of those case studies. So that's a really powerful space to kind of read stories and reach out to those organizations if you're interested in kind of hearing more from them. So I wanted to definitely orient you to that. And then I'll go to just to reiterate the guiding principles. And we have 6 here, and we've kind of slowly started to develop out each one of these even more. But as you scroll down, you will see, center historically and currently marginalized youth. And there are resources attached to this kind of in this Pinterest looking form. And so there's a course. So there's actually a learning course around recruiting students for student powered improvement. So how would you think about that? And so this course is again, I'll go into those courses, but that is one area to think about. And then case studies that are attached to kind of centering historically marginalized youth. And then if you go down, again, each one of those guiding principles has a section with some of the resources attached to it. So again, very powerful if you're thinking about like, we need to create better spaces for our students, right? More empowering spaces. Then you can kind of click into this and read more about that and how other people are doing that. This again has a course, but I will go up to the courses and show you. In the learn function, and I think this is some of, I really want to reiterate that these can be done mostly with adults, but again, this could be something that you think about if you form a team with students. You could do it together, right? And so each one of these courses is really designed to help you better understand how to improve the conditions to create more authentic and meaningful and powerful partnerships with students. So we give you the basic time that it might take, the suggested use and audience, and then it kind of goes through the content around each one of these. And so this shows kind of the framework itself and a course around what we're talking about with the framework. And then I wanted to show Care, Truth, and Hope. This one is a little bit more kind of bigger, but we have videos embedded in here, and we have guiding questions. There is links to some of the case studies that are connected to Care, Truth, and Hope. So again, we've done a lot of work to build out this content and resources for you to think about how to do this in your own space. And then we have even reflection questions for you to engage with. So that, Kari, did I miss anything? I kind of want to stop there because there's so much more.
Yeah, I want to just add 3 things before we turn it to Kelly to close us out today. One is that we are looking always for partners to help build content for learning courses. So if you are those partners with some good stuff, let's have a conversation. That's number one. Number two, we are expanding the site over the next year and a half. Most of these examples are about systems change, so involving students in something at a whole school or district level. We are trying to expand it to include lots of work at the classroom level, like the individual or teacher team level. If you know of or are part of where that is happening, we really would love to have a conversation and see if there's something that can work in the next iteration. And number three, just like all improvement work, this is possibly wrong, definitely incomplete. So we are happy that you can use these resources, but please reach out if you have more ideas. This time flew by. Oh my gosh, it always does. Kelly, take us out.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Kari. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing this resource with us. Really appreciate it. Also, just how much work you've put into it, and really just grateful for the chance in the spirit of learning. Like, it's really about a chance to like get better. Candace, to your question, will you get the presentation? Definitely. We will send out an email that will have this recording and then all the links and things that are that have been shared in the chat today. So please look for that. If you don't, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to share it with you if you don't get it in the email, but we usually send a follow-up. So as we do with our community of practice, it's always great to think through like what might you take from today's presentation and what will you try by next Tuesday? If you want to drop that in the chat, we'd love to hear it. Sometimes when we say things out loud, we're more likely to do it. And so that might include just some ideas like, you know, sharing this website with someone, like someone who maybe wasn't here today that you think could really benefit from it, or having a conversation with someone, maybe reaching out to a student to see how you could get them involved. Would love to hear what you're thinking of doing. So by next Tuesday, what will you take from today? If you could drop that in the chat. Amanda, if you could move forward. I just want to invite you all to join us at our next community of practice, which will be about a month from now. Speaking of students, we're going to have a student panel. So bring people out. We're going to get to hear from students. I probably should have read more of the things here before I set this up. But yeah, we're going to hear from students themselves about getting some advice early about starting the school year strong. So getting to hear from rising sophomores about what were the things that happened in their ninth grade year, the beginning of their ninth grade year, that made it really impactful for them, what helped them feel like they belonged at school, and getting some advice from them. So please join us. We're going to get to hear from students on the day in July. That'll be July 19th. And again, this is open for everyone. So please pass along the link. Registration, everyone can join. It's more fun when we're learning together. And then would love to get your input. So if you wouldn't mind, this is less than 2 minutes. I'd say we could probably get it done in a minute. Definitely shorter than those Spotify commercials. So if you could just give us a survey and give us your thoughts on how today was, we really want to hear from you because it helps us shape our community and get better. And just want to thank Amanda for all of your help. I'm so glad you're here. You've made Zoom such a more, it feels friendly. It's not as good as being in person, but somehow still feels lovely having you here. And thank you to all of you for taking your time out of your Wednesday to join us. And especially in the summer solstice. And thank you finally again to Daniel and Kari for presenting this work, being learners with us. Thank you for the invitation to learn with you and to figure out how do we create better conditions for students and involve them in it. So thank you for being lead learners and helping us and bringing us along with you. So grateful for everyone on this work. And I hope you have a great day. Enjoy all of the light today. Enjoy it. See you next time.